Hello, and welcome to the Path of Most Persistence. This is a place where we hear and share tenacious stories of overcoming obstacles with our partners who dare to share a bit of their own personal paths. Ana Teresa Dengo is a former diplomat with an engineering background who is now a mentor for those looking toward the next chapter of their lives. She retired after more than 3 decades working in the international field. For the United Nations, serving as a diplomat in Washington, D.C., New York, and Europe, and working at several international organizations, serving as an ambassador to Austria, Bosnia, Croatia, Montenegro, Serbia, and Slovakia, working mostly in the nuclear nonproliferation field. Ana Teresa, it is an honor to have you with us this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Violet. Thank you for the invitation. It's always good to talk to you.
You as well. And I want to say, I know I said this to you earlier, but I'm going to say it again. You are one of my sheroes. You're so accomplished, but at the same time, you have such a rich and loving family life. So I want to talk with you about so many things. So to begin, my brief introduction does not do your background justice, but let's just start off from the way I began about your position as a diplomat. First of all, for our audience, what does it mean to be a diplomat, to serve in that capacity?
Well, that's a very good question. In fact, it was one of the first questions one of the students asked me here.
Yes.
It's you represent your country at every single level possible. Obviously, it's the opportunity to represent your country in the discussions and the deliberations. Like you said, I worked in the nuclear field for a long time, but I also had a lot of other functions. I had to oversee a group of diplomats. I had to oversee the consulates, but I also had to go and establish new relationships with countries where Costa Rica had not been represented. For example, when you mention all the countries of the former Yugoslav Republic, that was a very interesting time.
Yes.
Because there were new countries with obviously new in all countries because they had their own Yugoslav background.
Yes.
But they were establishing their own new policies. And in many cases, interestingly enough, for example, they asked about the Costa Rican experience of being a neutral country. Costa Rica abolished its army in 1948. So after all the armed conflicts that they had in that region, many of them wanted to see how the experience would work for them.
Yes.
So that was a very interesting and a time that I loved. And they called me to talk about our experience and if it would work rather in their own countries. But also obviously it was the relationship particularly with Austria. And with Austria we had a very close relationship in the sense that there were 2 neutral countries with many similar positions. 2 small countries, obviously. Costa Rica is smaller than Austria, but not that much.
Yes.
But the positions, particularly at the UN, were very similar.
Yes.
So we had the opportunity to work together in promoting the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, to promoting the Hague Code of Conduct against ballistic missiles, and many others. In that field, it was kind of a dream relationship, like a dream marriage in that sense. So I consider that a blessing. It was interesting because I had worked with the Austrian ambassador in my previous capacity at the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. So we worked there together, became very good friends. Then he moved to the embassy, and a few months I followed him. So it was kind of meant to be in a way. But so it's easy for us to work together because we knew each other, had an excellent relationship. But like I said, the 2 countries were very, very similar in many ways.
Okay, so many things. So just because our audience is wide-ranging, I just want to clarify for the audience. So you, as an ambassador, were representing
Costa Rica.
Correct.
Okay, very good. And then you mentioned the UN, which stands for United Nations. Yes.
I have worked previously with the United Nations. I worked in New York before coming to Vienna. In fact, that was one of the times that was actually interesting, and it was one of the times where I had to re-engineer myself.
Yes.
I was working more in the economic field before coming, and in fact, I went to New York to work in the economic field. The UN has 6 main commissions,
Yes.
and they each one specializes in a particular field. But during my time there, I came because Costa Rica had the presidency of the so-called G77 countries, which are the developing countries,
Yes.
represented. It's 132 countries actually represented at the UN. And I came as an ambassador to the ambassador. And at that time, the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty was presented for signature. This is where the CTBT came. And the ambassador asked me to cover that. So I did, and I became very involved with that. And obviously had to prepare myself. Like I said, I came more from the economic field. This is
Yes.
more political field. But anyway, as things happened, I went back to Washington because I was actually working in Washington. And then a colleague called me and said, the CTBT has already been approved for signature, and the organization has been established in Vienna, which is called the CTBTO, or Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization.
Yes.
So the organization that followed the treaty, was in charge of implementing the treaty, was established in Vienna.
Mm-hmm.
I looked at it, he sent me the position, I applied,
Yes.
and it obviously had my name on it, because later on I learned that 400 people had applied to it, and
goodness.
they got me. It was interesting because I guess I had the combination of the background they were looking for. I had the political background from the diplomatic side, but I also had the technical background from the engineering side, which is not common, but it's the
That's
two
exactly
things together.
right. Yes.
So, but the interesting things, what I said about re-engineering, is that I went to the all the interviews
Yes.
in Vienna, and at the end, the director said, well, you're in engineering. You come more from the economic side. As an engineer, can you re-engineer yourself?
Yes.
And I said, yes. The 10 hours back to Washington, I said, what in the world did I do? So I started preparing myself, reading every single treaty, preparing myself, everything had to do with nuclear, to the point that I probably recited every single book and booklet and everything that there was to know about the theme, to the point that later on, when my younger daughter was preparing, she had to write an essay for college.
Yes.
She wrote that when other children were listening to bedtime stories, they were listening to the Treaty on Non-Proliferation. I don't know what kind of mother they thought that she had, but anyway.
An incredibly impressive mother. That's what they thought. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I thought that this was an interesting anecdote. But from then on, I basically moved to the field and later on was considered an expert in the field. So it was kind of an interesting shift for me.
Oh, it's so interesting. Let me take a few steps back. So to become a diplomat, an ambassador, how does that even happen to an individual? And I'm thinking, I know a bit of your story, but just for the audience, because there are so many young people, and maybe not even so much young people, but even people of my age or older that aspire to do the types of good work that maybe just a tiny bit of what you do. How did you even begin that path, Ana Teresa, about diplomacy and the ambassadorship? How did that even occur for you?
Well, it was interesting actually for me
Yes.
because it was probably not the regular career path that you would expect, because I did not go to the Diplomatic Academy.
Yes.
I did. I was working at the Peace Corps. Then I got a scholarship to go to Harvard.
Yes.
So as soon as I finished in Harvard, it was when Costa Rica took the chairmanship of the Group 77 in New York.
I see.
And the second in charge knew me well. And he said, I recommended you. So I went and sort of dived in. It was Oscar and I always joked that the song New York, New York, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. Yeah, this is the UN.
So that truly applied for you, yes?
Yes. No, because it was it was one of those things we had to negotiate with everybody. You had to negotiate within the group of developing countries first to get an agreement in order to take the discussions and the deliberations to the developed countries. So it was not an easy job.
No.
It was a very challenging, but at the same time, it offers so many opportunities and so many options there.
Yes.
That I consider it a blessing.
Of course.
So from then on, like I said, I went to work at the CTVTO.
Yes.
And then, again, because sometimes it's a matter of I don't know, I suppose you didn't do such a bad job and people knew about you, or but there was a meeting of the EU and Latin America.
Yes.
And the Minister of Foreign Affairs came to the meeting. And he was talking to me, and he said, people have recommended you, and we want to have the ambassador here because they only had a chargé d'affaires.
Yes.
Would you be interested? Okay. And it was one of those things again that took another engineering on my part in order to, because it was completely different. I mean, maybe, and as soon as I was appointed, the CTVTO had what it was called the PrepCom, the Preparatory Commission, which is the meeting of all the member states.
Yes.
And they appointed a president for every year.
Yes.
I was appointed ambassador in August. In September, they appointed me president to the PrepCom. So it was one of those things. They said it was very easy. You're coming after working there. I had been working there for 9 years. And so they just sort of look at things from the other side.
Well, as I'm hearing you speak, and I'm sure the audience as well, it seems as though, one opportunity opened another opportunity, but it's even more than that. I know, especially working with young people, I always like to say, to remind them, you never know who's watching. You never know who's listening to you, who's observing you. And those are the subtleties of how we go about our lives, how we go about our work, that people are always watching, listening, and if it's intentional or not, we're leaving an impression with everyone who comes into contact with us. And it seems as though that's a fine example. You're a fine example of that, is that you were going about your life, living and working and doing sounds like all the right things, but people were identifying you early on because they were recommending you without you even being aware that there was a recommendation to be had. Yeah,
that's true. I was. We were talking about our parents, our fathers, actually.
Yes.
I was raised by a father who always told me to be my personal best in everything I did. And this is one of the things. This is actually one of the things that I try to instill on my daughters too, but also the people that I work with and I have mentored. Always do your personal best. And my mother used to say, you have to be good when people are watching, but you have to be better when people are not watching.
Oh, say that! Say that again. Say that again.
Yeah, basically, then you have to be good when people are watching, but you have to be better when people are not watching. So you're not
Perfect.
doing a good job because you know the people are looking at you.
Right.
You do a good job because you believe you have to do it.
That's right.
So it's actually your own personal best for your own satisfaction, actually, to meet your purpose in life, whatever you're doing at that time.
That is so well said, and I love that. And I thank you for, sharing a bit of your mother and father. And that's true. And for those that are more practical in nature, it's the old saying that you play like you practice. So if you are constantly diligent to that level of performance or care or quality of behavior or character, whatever it is about yourself, you must do it always beyond when people are watching, like your mother said. I love that.
True, yeah.
Our parents are very important to us, aren't they?
They are. And it's funny because, I guess like everybody, there's a time in your life when you think you know better than your parents and all that story that we don't want to repeat here.
Yes.
But then after a certain time you realize that all the teachings that you have from your parents are there and that they shaped you.
Mm. What the two comments that you made about your mother and your father, were those the ones that stand out the most for you, or were there a few other lessons that you really learned from your parents that you hold closest to your heart?
Well, I have one that I would say helped me a lot, particularly in the nuclear field, and particularly in the deliberations in the nuclear field, which are usually very intense and very difficult sometimes.
Yes.
I come from a family of 6. I'm the 5th child in a family of 6. So survival was
Yes.
important.
Yes.
I think I probably learned negotiations at that time. But anyway, but the most important thing, I had a very quick temper. I could react like this, right? And I knew how to say exactly. So my mother used to say, okay, count from 100 down, and then say what you want to say. Don't keep it inside because it's not healthy, but count before you say it. And this helped me a lot because obviously when you're in the negotiations, you're not going to count from 100 down because there's no time.
Right.
But I did a lot of breathing work and meditation, which is another part of me. That's a different one. But taking a breath before you respond. That was probably one of the biggest gifts my mother gave me because it helped me keep at peace, respond, but not go to the jugular. It's just basically think about what you're going to say. Exactly.
Don't go to the kill shot. Yes.
Exactly.
What you say resonates with me so much in so many different ways. And I think that's a beautiful message that your mother gave you to stop, think it through before you say it, but to say it. You may say it in a different way, but not to hold it in. And that's an important message that sometimes gets left out when we tell individuals, count to 10 or count to 100 before you say or do something. But that second part of but say it, but do it is critical to not only probably the character of your own integrity, but for your own peace of mind and health rather than hold everything in. So that's a really valuable lesson, I think, that your mother shared with you. That sounds like it's been a very important part of your life as well. But when you talk about this, and this is something that I think everybody needs to hear, obviously, being an ambassador and a diplomat, there's diplomacy. What is something that we can all learn about diplomacy just in our daily lives? Because sometimes you turn on the radio, the television. Unfortunately, people don't appear to be as diplomatic as maybe we once were. What is something that we can do to better show diplomacy in our daily interactions?
That's a very good question. I think the key word, if we want to summarize it, is respect. respect for the others. Obviously, as a diplomat, you have your own country's policies, and sometimes you just have to defend things that are very, very difficult to defend.
Yes.
And it's kind of but the most important thing, again, like I said, is respect, and respect is critical in everything. It's critical in a personal relationship. It's critical in your professional relationship. It's critical in everything. And respect for everybody from all walks of life. And I think that's a critical thing that sometimes I feel that we're forgetting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the fact that I'm an individual. I can do this. I can be that. You can, but you have to remember that we're all one.
Yes. And there, don't you think too, Ana Teresa, that there's a distinction between having respect for someone, respecting maybe where they stand on policy or how they live their lives, versus just the simple act, or maybe not so simple, maybe difficult, challenging act of showing respect. So maybe I don't agree with your policy or your choices, whatever it is that I don't find of the highest regard, but I can at least demonstrate respectful behavior. And at a minimum, that is something that we can all aspire to do. We may not be able to respect everyone, but at least at a minimum show respectful behavior. Is there a difference, or do you think it's the same?
No. I think it has to do, first of all, if I respect myself, I will also respect other people.
Yes.
And respect doesn't necessarily mean that I even understand where you're coming from.
Yes.
But at least that I'm open to listening and trying to understand and to put myself in your shoes, and try to be open to a different point of view.
Absolutely.
And that's respect. I mean, that maybe I understand your position, maybe I understand your views in life, but I respect that you have a different way of looking at things.
And that had to be critical to your roles, because when you're dealing with different countries, not only are you dealing with different policy, but you're dealing with different cultures and different roles and how people communicate with each other. And it could be as basic as male versus female communications. It could be all different types of cultural aspects as well.
Sure. I mean, some of them we even have jokes about, but
yes,
but,
I'm sure.
But the important thing, I think, is, again, to be understanding and to try to see where people are coming from. But again, if I respect myself, it's easier to respect other people.
That's right.
So I think that's a critical point.
And respecting yourself, how does one begin that process? Because I think for some individuals, it just comes to them naturally. Maybe perhaps it was because the way they were brought up, maybe the way they were nurtured. But I think for some individuals, they have that sense about them. It comes to them easier versus someone who lacks that. How can one build on that self-respect of reminding themselves of how important that is? Because again, some people find that really challenging if they take time to think about it. Is there any way to build that up?
That's a very good point. I think it's important to work on developing your worth, so you can respect yourself. And the one thing that's important also is to know that if you fail at something, doesn't mean that you're a failure. So I think that's a very critical thing.
That is so critical.
Sometimes, particularly young people, beat themselves, and now they feel like something, and I'm a failure, I can't do anything, I'm a loser, and a word that I hate, by the way.
Yeah.
But it's also important that you understand that your worth doesn't really come from one single action. It's your sort of integral aspect of yourself that's important.
Thank you for that. That is so well said. Okay, so I'm going to try. There's so many topics I want to cover here, but I want to take a couple of steps back. You mentioned, and I read that you had an engineering background. So can you talk about that engineering background?
Sure. I'm an industrial engineer by background. Before I did my master's in public policy, I came to industrial engineering, and that's what I said when I said that I worked more in the economic field. I worked in the private sector. I worked at the Peace Corps. I was Peace Corps associate director for small business, and it was a part that I really loved. Probably that was one of the jobs that I loved better. And the industrial engineering, I like two aspects more than anything. One, the managerial part. The other one is working with people. I love to work with people. I love to help them help themselves, to really overcome obstacles and overcome any kind of challenges that they have, so to kind of build them up. One of the things that I loved, and that's probably why I loved working at the Peace Corps so much, is the training aspect, the tutoring and training aspect, and helping people to develop better, to find. For me, if I had to define the purpose in life, I would say growth. And to grow in anything you're doing. It doesn't matter what you're doing at that time, because there are different times when you go with different options and different paths. But always look for a way to grow. So for me, I guess from the engineering background, every time I had a change, I would actually get my engineering tools and then sort of define a new path. It's funny because even for the book that you mentioned, I start with a mind map and define a path.
Yes.
So if when I'm working, you come into my office and it's all this post-its and things. I'm old school, so.
And listen, I'm right there with you, so please, no apologies necessary.
So yeah, I guess in a way, the engineering background has shaped the way that I do a lot of things. How I organize people, how I organize my tasks, how I organize my priorities, and everything.
You sound like a natural-born educator, trying to educate and help others improve, to self-improve. I love that spirit about you. And you mentioned when you began your field with the ambassadorships and in diplomacy, working in the the nuclear non-proliferation area, and that there was a transition you had to study. And that resonates so much for me, Ana Teresa, because, as you know, my background was not in nuclear applications at all. I was a K-12 educator before I started working for the university. And I appreciate and I understand having to study up, to be proficient, and not only be proficient in a particular area, but to succeed and to make a positive impact. So for you, leaving behind, maybe not leaving behind, but changing your focus, maybe perhaps is a better way to phrase it, engineering and the economic background that you had to a more nuclear aspect. What was the rewarding aspect of learning or focusing on a new sector or a new area of interest?
Well, it was interesting because when I came to the CTBTO, to Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, this is a treaty that's a very specific in the sense. Well, but basically the whole treaty is the purpose of the treaty is to ensure that no country undertakes nuclear tests.
And what year was that?
In 1998.
Yes.
The nuclear tests are basically the anteroom in order to build nuclear weapons.
Yes.
So the whole testing process had been taken place since the end of the Second World War, when the armed scale escalated, and the whole building up of nuclear weapons in order to during the Cold War. But the interesting thing about this is that it had 4 technologies that were used, what we call, they had peaceful uses of technologies.
Yes.
But at the same time, together, there were 4 different technologies, radionuclide. The 4 technologies together, there were stations being built all over the world. 321 stations being built all over the world, placed in strategic locations in order to detect any kind of action that was not necessarily a natural happening, right?
Yes.
So the interesting thing is that I understood the technologies as an engineer.
Yes.
But my role was mostly to deal with the different countries in order to convince them to sign and ratify the treaty for it to enter into force. So that was kind of a challenging situation. I remember there was another challenging situation. That it was challenging in the sense that there were very, very, very few women in the field. So that's another thing. They looked at me like, she understands the technologies, she has a political side, and she's a woman. Basically, which planet did she come from? And I've heard a few of those things.
Yes,
but anyway,
I'm sure.
But it was very interesting in the sense of understanding how the different technologies help to detect that there was a, let's say, man-made activity.
Yes.
So it was the first treaty that was actually, that's why it's called comprehensive, that actually detected activities underwater, underground, in the air, and space. So they together sent information to what the data center that actually captured the information that came from the 321 stations that I mentioned. And one technology by itself was not, did not provide sufficient information to make a decision that this was a suspicious activity. For example, it was there was an earthquake. Okay, so the stations detected that.
Yes.
But it could be a man-made earthquake, or there was some novel gases that being emanated. It could also come from a man-made activity. There was a change in the warmth of the water, again, because it could be some activity under the ocean, etc., etc. So it's kind of so the board together gave a full information of whether there was a suspicious activity, and then the countries had to meet and then take action in order what to do, what the activity that was being undertaken by that country. Basically, take it to the Security Council if there's a suspicious activity there.
Critical, important work there. You mentioned being a woman, being very few women at the time, and still that persists, I believe, the underrepresentation. But how, although you appear, and I know that you are a very strong woman, a very self-confident woman, but at times that had to have been, especially in the early years, not only disappointing, but can sometimes wear on you. I would imagine maybe those comments about being a woman in the room when there's so few. How did you persist through all of that and maintain a level of diplomacy, but also just of self-confidence and just holding that space, because it can be overwhelming, I think, at times for some individuals. Was that any of those aspects is something that you maybe experienced? Was it difficult for you?
Oh, it was. It was. When I mentioned before the breathing, one of the things that I do in the morning is I meditate. And I visualize my day in writing. So basically, this is something that I've been doing for a long time. I don't know whether, again, this is engineering background or what, but I plan my day in writing in advance. And among the things that I do is I actually send good energy to whatever meeting I'm going to be in. And that has two purposes. First of all, it moves the energy in the meeting, but it also helps me to prepare and to be, ready for anything that's coming. I mean, there were some times when you felt like, I'm going to take my shoe and throw it out. But,
yes, I'm sure.
But no, I managed to actually keep my internal peace.
Your center.
Exactly, keep
Yes.
centered. Even though sometimes it wasn't easy. I mean, sometimes it was. I was talking to my youngest daughter the other day. She works at the UN also, and she's 32, and then she's had to negotiate with a lot of high-level people and everything. And she was talking to this person from ex-country, which I'm not going to mention, but they're not easy with the relationship with women. And he told her something. And then she said, did you really mean to say that out loud? And everybody started laughing. So that sort of, so that means sometimes you have to do things like that.
Yes. Yes.
Take it as a, disarm the other person in a way.
That's right.
And that happened to me many times. I mean, it was one of those things when you really had to gather everything you had inside
Yes.
in order to keep your calm. But like I said before, to actually answer and not keep it inside. And that in itself, I think, helped to develop the respect from other people.
That's right.
Now, I have to say, maybe when I talked about the preparation and reading, and it was one of the things that I did, and I probably had to do it twice as many of the men who were in the field, that I always made sure that I was prepared.
Yes.
Mostly because of me. I mean, it was, I need to be prepared for this, and sometimes I was more prepared than I needed to be.
Yes.
But it's always important to try to think ahead and feel prepared.
Oh, thank you for mentioning that. That, I think, is critical, and another message we like to share with our young folks that we interact with. It's better to be over-prepared, because you never know in what direction a meeting or an activity can take. But at least if you anticipate it, you can be more centered.
Exactly.
Because you have that self-confidence within that at least you may not be totally prepared, but you're more prepared than maybe you would have initially been if you only would have covered the aspects of what was just intended for the meeting. There's always something that's going to go far beyond your anticipation, I believe. But I want to know about your meditation. When did that start? Did it come about because of an experience that you had, or did it come about organically? That was just part of your practice, or who you were as an individual, that you needed to gather yourself each morning?
Well, this started in my early 20s. Again, I because I just wanted to keep centered.
Yes.
And it helped me a lot in deciding what I was going to do in life, because, and this is not going to sound the way I'm meant to say, because I was good at many things.
Yes.
So, I mean, some people are very clear in what they want to do,
Yes.
and they went, I was not. So it helped me sort of get clarity on what I wanted to do. But it also helped me, again, in my relationships, and again, in keeping sort of, like I said, my temper.
Yes. Yes.
in a control way. It's kind of a. So I at that time, it was it was called the Silva Mind Control. It changed a bit because there were some political connotations to it and everything, but it has persisted. Now it's called the Silva Method, and I think it's. But anyway, but it's what started me going, and I did grow up a lot in that, not only in the meditation, but also in the visualization and many other things that I have a routine that I do in the morning.
Yes.
But it has grown. I mean, it's part of it's sort of been growing with me. As I get
as you have, it's evolved.
More experience.
Yes. I get it, and that has always worked for me too. I think I was meditating on things far beyond I even realized what I was doing, but it did help me calm and think more clearly. And I always like to say to myself and to other people that when I'm doing something like that, it's an opportunity to take my temperature. You know, where am I? Am I running hot? Am I running cold?
That's a good way of saying that, yeah.
and to kind of step outside of yourself. Why I'm doing or saying what I'm saying. Is it really what I'm intending? You hear the word intentional all the time. Am I being intentional about my purpose or what my intent is to communicate? But it certainly has evolved over the years for me, and I know when I'm struggling, maybe it's a personal situation or even professionally on a creative aspect, or there's an issue that I need solved, I will take time, and I have this little practice that I do to come to that point. But when I'm doing it, I always come back with a resolution. It may not be 100% clear, but I always come away from that practice identifying a path. And that has really helped me not only professionally but personally in so many ways. So I love hearing you talk about that for you. And you mentioned writing being part of that. Now, this helps me to pivot to an aspect of the conversation I really want to spend some time on. You've published a book. You're working, from what I understand, on another book. Was that intentional, or did that grow out of your writing, that daily meditation of writing?
Well, it was kind of, I think the writing is just because I needed to kind of see my day.
Yes.
But I've always written. Actually, started writing when I was in grade school. Mm. And it was just kind of part of me, whether it was a diary or I just wrote something and kind of, but it became, it sounds funny, because then the teachers would ask me to write if it was, I don't know, National Day, or it was Flag Day, or it was Tree Day, whatever. They would ask me to write something. And after a while, I felt like the writing was for me. It was not to share. It was something to express myself, right?
Yes.
So I kind of left it on the side and pretended I didn't write anything but I kept on writing. Sometime they asked me to, I don't know if you know Jack Canfield?
Yes.
Yes. They asked me to co-write a book. So I wrote a chapter of that. But I felt like there was a lot that I could have said. And I think that sort of brought me to thinking maybe I could put this in a book.
Yes.
And the book I wrote initially was called On the Right Side of 50, which then became The Right Side of 60. Because I didn't have time. It was funny because I said, okay, fine, I'll do it when I have time.
Yes,
I'll do it when I have time, and the time you always use the time in something else.
That's right. That's right.
But all of a sudden, I found myself with the time. It was if not now, then when, right?
Yes.
So I wrote it mostly based on my experience after retirement, thinking that it could help people what to do after retirement. But then I got asked a lot of questions because it was turn the page, basically how to embrace your next chapter. Like I said, initially after retirement, but a lot of people started asking, what about my next chapter after the university? What about my next chapter after COVID? What about my next chapter after, I don't know,
a marriage, a baby,
anything,
a death?
exactly,
What,
yes.
yes.
So it kind of became kind of a wider next chapter
Yes.
in that sense. So it's been interesting because I love working with young people. I love working with people in general, but I love, if I can help make a difference. Like I said before, I mean, I think that your purpose in life is to grow, but if you can help other people to grow in order to contribute.
Mm-hmm.
And how you contribute, it varies in different times of your life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
I love you talking about, writing, it was for you. And is writing about not only finding your center, but to organize all the possibilities? Is it that practice too? Or is it just emotions that just must come out? Do you need to see them? Or is it just a way to facilitate all that's going on internally to come out in some way? And I'm asking you this because, my team and I, we've been doing quite a bit of writing. I've done some writing, and we've had we've had a few authors on the podcast because for me, I think writing is such a beautiful creative process, but it looks so different to each person that writes. And that's why I ask you, just if you could share just a bit more, because I'm so intrigued.
I think for me it's both.
Yes.
Sometimes it's just a way to put it on the paper and, kind of, it's sort of a catharsis.
Yes.
Other times it's just basically, I feel like expressing the beauty or expressing something that I feel. And other times it's just a way to organize my mind. In fact, it's funny because sometimes I go back to something I wrote and I said, well, interesting. So this should have been there that time, or it just came to me sometimes. Something that I have is that sometimes I have very vivid dreams.
Mm.
So when I wake up or drive my dreams, sometimes I just don't wake up. I write them without turning the light on or anything. You have to write something because otherwise you think you're going to remember that.
Yes. Yes.
So I write, a couple notes, and then I develop something from what I dreamt. And many times I found that helps me achieve clarity. Sometimes I have a very clear dream that there was something that I was thinking about, and trying to maybe even writing about or just meditating about. It doesn't necessarily come as a message during the day. It comes as a dream. And I think that's a practice that for me works very well.
Okay, I'm intrigued by this. So when you say it comes to you in a dream or at night, do you believe that is just part of your unconscious working through a dream, or do you think it has some kind of divine inspiration?
Both.
Mm.
Both. I'm a firm believer in divine inspiration. I mean, sometimes the things that you write cannot just come from your own thinking.
Yes.
I don't think of myself as that.
Yes, yes.
But sometimes it's funny because I dream with the specific people.
Mm.
And it's very clear messages.
Mm.
Other times I just get just the dream, and when I start thinking about what does this dream mean, it helps me look at things in a different way.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Do you ever have a situation where you've hit a wall, so to speak, you're stuck in maybe the writing process or a creative process, and if you have, how do you get over it? How have you bust through, or how do you overcome that block? Can you encourage creativity in some way?
Yes. Basically what I do is put it on the side and go do something. Walking nature, or do something or something completely different.
Mm-hmm.
Listen to music, or just, I don't know, talk to a friend or something that sort of brings me away from the fact that if I start thinking, I'm blocked. I'm not going to write anything. Then I'm really blocked.
Yes.
So I do something different, and then I find that the inspiration comes
Mm-hmm.
in a completely different way.
Yes.
So that helps a lot. It's interesting you asked me this because I was thinking about persistence. And that reminded me this morning, I remember, oh gosh, it must have been in grade school or something, that they did this exercises that they did on how you overcome challenges and things. And one of the questions is, there was a lot of us, I guess about 10 kids or so. What happens if you come to a very high wall? What do you do? And then there were a lot of ideas, and you find a way to climb it, or you find a way to, if you can bring it down, or if you find a way to. And then I analyzed it, and I said, well, I find a creative way to go around it. And the teacher said, you're the only one who said that. Well, yeah, because I figured I was going to beat myself against the wall. No, thank you. I have to find a way. So, I mean, this is the same with life.
That's right.
Sometimes you just have to find a creative way, even with perception. Maybe you're perceiving things in a completely different way as an obstacle, and it might be an opportunity. So, in a way, to find ways to go around the wall.
I love that. That's right. It's kind of reframing a situation. Look at it differently. If you can't go through it, over it, around it, maybe even under it.
Exactly.
I like that. Of course, I want to be mindful of our time, but I have a few more questions before we close out.
Okay.
But I want to know, for the audience, let us know, again, the name of the book that you've already published or any of your other works and where we can find it.
Sure, thank you. It can be found on Amazon.
Yes.
And it's called How to Create, Embrace, and Step into the Next Chapter of Your Life.
Very nice. Very nice. And you are working on a second book?
I am.
Is there an anticipated release?
It should be soon because I have a contract.
Yeah.
So basically,
Yes.
I'm pressing myself for that.
Okay.
And I have somebody breathing over my shoulder. But the funny thing is that there's still some questions on which direction it's going to go.
Yes.
So I hope I get clarity on that.
I'm sure, no doubt you will do that because you excel in every area. And I want to know too, Ana Teresa, with all your background and professionally and personally, especially working with young people, is there a particular message that you'd like to provide for our young people that are listening, or maybe again, doesn't have to be just young people, anyone, as they move forward in their lives or come across some kind of obstacle in life? What can you leave our audience with? Any positive messages or thoughts?
Well, I think one of the things that we have to do is believe in yourself, but also make an effort to grow every day. I think I mentioned this before, but I think for me, not growing is basically dying.
Yes, yes, yes.
So, and I think, like I said, I have a routine in the morning in order to get my day going. But it is important to set a routine that actually develops you in every way as an individual. I like to, like I said, I meditate. I do my visualization. I exercise. Sometimes I just exercise on the at home, or sometimes most of the time I have to walk the dogs, or the dog walks me. I don't know. And then read. And after that, I do some writing. And this kind of writing in the morning is more, like I said, in preparation for the day. But the most important thing, I think, is to find a way to grow. However you do it, but to develop a habitual sort of system to help you grow every day. And as you grow, you also believe more in yourself because you understand and grasp what you can do.
And that's a beautiful thing when you find
it's a very important thing.
Yes.
And the other thing is don't give up. Look for different ways of doing things, but have a clear goal in whatever you want to do. It can be like mini goals if you have different things that you want to achieve, but work for that. Focus and work on that, and keep going. One thing I didn't mention before is that when we talked about being prepared, one thing that's important is to be humble. If you don't know something, ask. Sometimes people don't know, but they feel like if they ask, they're going to be, they're going to look like, I don't know, they don't understand, or no. It's important to ask, to be humble. Sometimes I just say, no, I'm sorry, I don't know this. Either can you help me, or give me time to prepare and understand it.
Well, and that goes along with credibility.
It does.
Because if you try to pass yourself off as, people recognize that as maybe perhaps you're untrustworthy because you say you know something when you do not.
And when we talked about credibility, I think the other word we're missing here, but you mentioned it before, is being authentic. Because I think that's a critical thing. Be true to yourself. And sometimes being true to myself means, today I will just relax.
Yes.
And then nothing's going to happen. The world is going to fall.
And that's okay, just to relax. You don't have to produce every day.
Exactly.
And one of my final questions, you've been all over the world. You've lived in so many different countries. You've worked with so many different organizations. You moved to College Station, Texas, not so long ago. Why College Station, Texas? And how have you all enjoyed living here?
Well, that's a good question. College Station came because of my husband. This is one time when I follow him. Yeah. And he was offered a job at Texas A&M. And we discussed it. At that time, I was working for the University for Peace, the UN University for Peace, teaching some courses, also worldwide. So it was kind of I was flexible in that sense.
Yes.
But I decided it was a new challenge for me too. So I decided, okay, fine, I will not continue working with them. So I came here with an empty bag. I'm just to see what happened. It's been amazing, but it's also been very challenging.
Yes.
In fact, I had some health issues, et cetera, but it was kind of an interesting new path.
Yes.
And then that's when I started writing the book, and I started doing. At the beginning, I came and I started volunteering because I couldn't work because I didn't have I only had the visa.
Oh yes, yes.
But it was interesting because I started volunteering and I started working with some people just to support them. But then the health issues came, and I had to put a stop, and then COVID came.
Yes.
So it's been kind of an interesting time. But I like it here. I mean, it's kind of funny because I lived in the U.S. many times, at different times of my life, but never in Texas.
Yes.
Actually, never. It was only up and down the East Coast, never on this side. But it's been an interesting experience, and particularly very interesting to live in a very academic sort of environment.
Yes.
Which is challenging, and at the same time, it offers so many opportunities to grow. So I think it's been a wonderful experience. I've found that Texans are welcoming in general. It's kind of, we had excellent neighbors, we had excellent friends. So it was something I never expected. I had never seen myself in Texas, probably back in New York or back in Washington. But it's been a very good experience in that sense.
Well, that's wonderful to hear, and I know we're better for having you here, and I just want to say, Ana Teresa, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I'll say it again. You have always been someone that I've always looked up to. I admired and respect tremendously. You're a woman of great accomplishment, but more than that, you're a woman of integrity and strength and beauty and generosity. So thank you for being that example to me and so many other, not only women, but to everyone that for whom come around you or in your circle. So again, great respect and appreciation for coming in today.
Thank you, Valerie. And thank you particularly to hear those words coming from you, because I also admire you, and I think you're doing a wonderful job. So thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation.
Always. I'd love to have you back, especially to talk about your new book whenever that's released.
No pressure.
And to our audience, thank you so much for listening in today. I hope you've had the opportunity to listen to the entire conversation and all of our other conversations on all of our platforms. But for me, as Ambassador Ana Teresa Dengo has always been such a role model in so many ways, I'm going to try to emulate some of her best practices, to wake up every morning meditating with great anticipation, to think before I speak and act, but to do my best and make a difference in the world. Thank you and have a wonderful day.